Good afternoon, welcome to Rundlii Gaming. We're going to be doing another video on the game of Patchwork. This is a Rosenberg game. In this particular one you are building a quilt. You're trying to do it as effective as possible. And there's going to be a couple little things we'll go over on the board here. So you have these buttons, and they come in different denominations. They are effectively currency as well as victory points at the end of the game. So it is something that you collect, but you also spend it in order to get more in the future as well. And then you have the different patches. So the different patches will have a couple different characteristics on it as well. There's going to be this blue symbol here. That is how much of these buttons it takes to actually purchase that particular one. And then there's also a little time one on there as well, which is how much time it takes you in order to put it onto the board itself. So like in this case it has 6 buttons on it and 5 times. So if I were to buy this, I'm going to spend 6 buttons, which would be the little blue ones here, and then I would move 5 spaces if I were to do that. And you'll also probably notice that they're kind of set up a little bit different than normal. They're in a circle around the board itself. It's going to be because this little figure here is going to move as you purchase them, and it opens up which ones you can actually purchase. These are actually randomly set up. And also the third characteristic on these as well, though, they do have actual big buttons on it, and depending on when you hit different triggers on the board, you will get additional buttons back for that. So that's another thing to take into consideration as well. Whereas some of these don't actually have any big buttons on it, it's just a piece itself. So you'll set up a board. This is actually double-sided, so it kind of depends on your preference as far as what you want to play with. This one feels a little bit more like organized, where this is like just a little spiral type thing. And then you'll also have a additional victory point thing here. This is like a bonus marker. If you can fill a 7x7 on your board anywhere, then you will get this, and it's worth an extra 7 victory points. The board itself is a 9x9, so it only has to be part of the board in order to get that. So how the round itself works is you'll randomly decide who's going to be first player. So we'll say in this particular case it's green. Once you choose what side of the board you want, you're going to put these single ones on the spaces here, and you'll see some squares on the board as far as where those go. So they're in preset locations. Each player is also going to get 5 buttons, so we'll give 5 buttons to each player. And since green here is on top, they're going to be the ones that go first. Now, how the round works itself is what you're going to do is either buy a tile or you're going to pass. So whenever you're looking to buy a tile, you can only choose between one of the 3 tiles that are coming up next. So since the it's kind of like a huge meeple looking thing, is here, you can choose between this one, or that one. So this one costs 1 button, 4 time, but it gives you 1 actual button for if you get any. This one will cost 6 buttons, so we can't afford it right now since we only start with 5, and 5 time. This one is 2 buttons, 2 time. So let's say in this case they're wanting to build up a little bit, so they're going to grab that one there. So in this case they're going to take 4 back, and they're going to take this tile. Now normally you would move this person here to wherever that's at, but it's pretty much in the same place. And now at this point you're going to place this somewhere on the board. Let's go and move it like that. You cannot move this for any reason. So once you put it on your thing there, you can no longer move it afterwards. So that's going to come to consideration when you start putting other things on there, and you're going to try to find the best way to place it on there. So now that we've placed this, we've purchased it for 1, and now we're going to spend 4 time doing that. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Now green has made it to one of these buttons here, and you'll see a couple of these buttons on the board. They're kind of like income phases, I guess you could call them. is that if you hit the space before the button, after the button, or if you cross over the button, you will trigger the income on it. And you can only trigger each button one time. But what you're going to do is look on your board, and you're going to count up all your buttons that you currently have sewed into it on here, and you're going to get income equal to that. So in that case, I have one button on my quilt here, so I'm going to gain one button for that. Now, because yellow is currently last right now, they are actually going to be the next person to go. So there will be certain situations where you could go multiple times before the other player takes an action. Let's say, for example, this player here is going to buy this one for 2, which means I'll get 3 back and change. You're going to move the person where the last tile that was bought is, and now I get to go and drop this on my board here. That's going to move me 2 times, so 1, 2. Now, because yellow is still currently in last as far as this board goes, they get to go again as well. So sometimes it does help as far as trying to get specific pieces, or if you're just trying to fill up the board really well. But let's say I go ahead and pay 3 more to grab this one here. And let's go ahead and just drop that there. So that would normally move there, but it's basically the same spot. And then at that point, I'm going to move up one more time. It will still be yellow's turn. However, they don't have any buttons left. So you can do one of 2 things. As I mentioned, you could always buy a tile on the board, or you can pass. Now what pass is going to do is you're going to keep moving until you are no longer going to be the first player or the next player to go. If you're sitting on top of the piece, it is whoever's on top. So let's say if yellow somehow moved here, yellow's still the next player to go because they're currently on top. But in this case, they had to move 2 spaces, so they're going to collect 2 money on that. And since they passed the button here, they're also going to collect income if they have it. In this case, yellow does not have any income, so they will not be collecting any money as far as that goes. That's going to go back over to green. So green is the one that's behind right now, on here. So they can choose between these next 3. So what we're going to probably do is we're going to have them spend 5 on this one, which will add some more income on there. So they spent the 5, and they're going to burn 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now this player's sitting at 2 money, so the only thing they can buy is this one here. It's a little bit of an odd looking piece, but it will increase the income a little bit. So we'll go ahead and drop that there. Because they don't have to be adjacent when you place these tiles. You can literally just drop them wherever you want. So, actually let's move it over here instead. And that will spend 5 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I will go to a button. I will get my income, which will be 1 more button. So I'll now be at 2. So now since green is in the back, they're going to now do their action as well. And this is actually just going to go back and forth until the people continue moving all the way until they reach the center spot. But let's say if we were to get to like here, for demonstration purposes, and we kept buying all these tiles as we went, so these boards would probably be a lot more full. But once you get closer to the center here, you'll notice that there's like one last button and then the end marker. The end marker is just this big square here. But let's say green were to take something that gives them 4 movement. You can continue moving even though there's no more spaces afterward, but once you hit this last space and you place that on the board, whatever tile you grabbed, that will be the last turn you do. And if you haven't scored the button already here, then you'll also be able to get your last income off that as well. So let's say you ended up in the space right before, you will trigger that, and then the next round, if you were to get like 6 more time, you would just move to the last and you could still place it. And that's really the bulk of Patchwork itself. As far as the tiles that I took off the board, as I mentioned, if you run into a square that is before or after, just like these buttons, or if you pass it, let's say green ends up here, they're going to take this tile and they can place it anywhere on the board that they want. You do have to place it immediately. You cannot hold on to it or anything like that. But sometimes it helps for like filling up little gaps. So if you're moving along this board really quickly, there's a good chance that your board may be a little less organized, and sometimes these help fill them up a little bit. On top of that, once both players make it to the center, neither of them get any more actions at that point. At that point, what you're going to do is you're going to count up all your empty space on your particular board, and you're going to subtract 2 buttons from your currency that you currently have in order to, well, you'll lose 2 money for every empty space you have. And then on top of that, if you currently have a 7x7 bonus, you're also going to factor that in as well as far as your victory points. So you could end up with a lot of victory points. I've ended up in negatives once or twice. It just depends on how well you're able to achieve this, the board itself, and how much money you also have at the end of the game. And it kind of strikes a balance between those. Like, there's been a lot of games that I had a ton of income and I still lost because I had a lot of extra space. And then there's some people that had very little income but still won due to the fact that they were able to fill up most of their board. So there are different strategies involved in the game as well. So it is kind of a matter of balancing out your space versus income. And you kind of want to get a little bit of a balance on that as well. So that's the game of Patchwork. As I mentioned, this is a very quick, I want to say on average 20 to 30 minutes normally. Especially once both players know what they're doing. You can play it pretty quickly. You just throw the pieces on there. These are always random every game. During setup, one thing I forgot to mention is there's this really easy piece. It is a 2 cost 1 time. That is always your last piece in the thing, so wherever you set up the pieces, once you find this one, you just put it next to it, and then they're going to go the opposite direction of that. We usually go clockwise, so I'll usually put it clockwise next to it, but this should always be your last piece that you have on it. So that always determines where this guy here goes. But that's the game of Patchwork. As I mentioned, it's a very casual, quick game for 2 players. So if you've enjoyed this video, comment on it, subscribe if you haven't already subscribed. Thank you for watching Rundlii Gaming, and you have a good day.